Hello, friends. Hello, Blazor fans. Welcome back to another Blazor Power Hour. It's been a little while since I've had one of these shows. I've been heads down working on some Blazor-related projects. But most of all, we haven't had a whole lot of Blazor updates until recently. So the .NET 8 previews are starting to come out. And in Preview 4, we got a brand new feature that we'll talk about today called Blazor Sections. And we're up to Preview 5 now. So I've actually got these installed on my system. Let me go ahead and do a screen share. We'll jump on into some code here very shortly. Let's see here. Let's share the entire screen on screen 1. There we go. Put myself down in the corner so you don't have to look at the big talking giant head all morning. Good morning, afternoon, good evening for those of you in different time zones. So I've got some new things installed. So if you're going to follow along with me today, you're going to need some of the newest bits that just shipped. So I've got Visual Studio 2022 Preview. This is only going to work in Preview right now because it is in the preview editions of .NET. And I'm going to jump over to my command line real quick, and we will do a command line .NET /version. And you will see that I am on version 8.0.100 preview 5. And a bunch of numbers. Preview 5 is the important part. This is .NET 8 preview 5. This would work on Preview 4 if you already have Preview 4 installed. Preview 5 came with a brand new template we'll take a very brief look at. I don't think it's quite complete yet. Matter of fact, that's in the changelog for Preview 5, is that it's not quite a complete feature. It's just the toe in the water, what will eventually become the United template for Blazor. So that's in there as well. We'll use that today just because it's new and shiny and we can. What other new bits do I have installed here? I don't think there's anything else that's a prerequisite for today. Let me get my Zoom tool up and running though, in case I need to focus in on something on the screen. And it looks like we are good to go. Again, Visual Studio Preview, if you're just joining us, it's not going to work in your regular Visual Studio. So the dashboard for this might look a little bit different. That is because it's the preview edition. This is the new startup experience. I quite like where they're going with this. So there's some quick actions here on the right, and then you've got your recents on the left. Let's give that a thumbs up. I like the way this is starting to pan out. But what we want to do is create a brand new project. You will see that there are a few Blazor templates in here. We've got Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly, Blazor Web App, Blazor Server Empty, and Blazor WebAssembly Web App. This new one, just Blazor Web App. This one is not a server or a WebAssembly app. It is a mixed or dynamic mode of Blazor. It's Blazor United, what was being called Blazor United by Steve Sanderson. We're not going to get too much into the details of what that is today, but we're going to go ahead and use that template because it's brand new and we're testing out some new features. Might as well go with the new and shiny. Project name, let's see, Blazor Power Hour, and we're going to be looking at sections today. So we'll call this Blazor Power Hour Sections. So brand new app here. And again, we're on .NET 8 Preview. So that's going to be the framework that I'm going to choose. Go ahead and hit Create. And we're off and running. So while this spins up a new project, let's talk about sections in general. They've been in ASP.NET for a while. So if you've done any web forms, you might remember the content regions in there. What are the names for those again? I was just writing about this earlier today. I've got an article coming out to talk about all of these things. And I name it here in the article. What is, so it used to be called content placeholder in web forms. and render section in MVC. So we've had this feature in other frameworks before. This is just the Blazor flavored version of it. So if you've done any ASP.NET in the past, it's probably going to look fairly familiar to you. I just reinstalled this. I'm going to have to move this over to the left-hand side. Solution Explorer, like, can we just find a place that we're all happy that this thing exists? In Visual Studio Code, it comes up on the left. Visual Studio comes up on the right. Let's just be consistent. I'm going to pin mine to the left, just so they're always in the same place. So whereas file explorers always come up in other apps anyway. So I don't know if that's a legacy holdover from previous versions of Visual Studio or what, but this is where it belongs for me. This is the new Blazor template that's being worked on. Again, this is a preview of .NET 8. So you'll see some things have changed a little bit in this template section here. There probably is going to be some more things added to this as we go along. There's the missing like click button or count button demo. If you've ever looked at the Blazor template before, there's just this very simple counter demo. So we don't have that in this version. And then there is a show data, which used to be called fetch data, which has a new thing attached to it called attributes stream rendering is true. So it's supposed to demonstrate the stream rendering. I don't think this is fully working quite yet, but this is kind of the getting the toe in the water to get these things going. So we're not going to mess around with that today. We will jump back to the fetch or show data page to do a little something in a minute, but we're not fixated on that streaming data feature today. So we'll give this app a run, and let's see what the template looks like. It should be pretty familiar. It should be the usual. Let's allow access to this, and then it comes up on my other screen. There we go. So here's our hello world. There's our fetch or show data page there, and this is again the usual Blazor application that we get out of the box. Hopefully this is all coming through okay on stream. Looks all right from my point of view. Let me know in chat if the audio, anything like that needs to be adjusted or the fonts are too small. We'll get that fixed up. So traditionally in Blazor, in previous versions of Blazor, if we wanted to add some content to some part of our main layout, and we're inside, say, the fetch data view, and I want to control maybe something on this navigation bar, or put something up here in this region outside of my view being, let's see if I can change my, I know there's a, wanted to change the color. I can't remember the key for that for my annotation software here, but this is my view. If I want my view to kind of write something up here outside of the views hierarchy, I can't do that easily. I have to set up some kind of state management system or something that allows me to communicate between these two components. That usually ends up creating these dependencies across components, so they know about each other, or they have some kind of pub sub pattern. It gets overly complex for what we really just want to do, and that's adjust some content, add some content, display something outside of the current component. So what sections do is they allow us to kind of break outside of that hierarchy and talk to other places, or render in other places within the template. So it's a really nice feature. It just makes things a whole lot easier to do. So let's take a look at how that works in .NET 8. So the first thing I want to do is open up my shared folder here in the Explorer. I'm going to grab my main layout, and we're going to go into the main layout here. And let's actually run the application again. So I can break this down side by side. We can see what part of the HTML here renders what in the app. And we need this in not a responsive mode so we can fully see what's being rendered out here. So we'll break into annotations again. And this section of code here basically renders the outside shell of the page here. And we have the article or body. This is where the actual page components get rendered. And then if you look here, we have this thing called top row. Top row is the class name that was given. I think that's a Bootstrap class. We're still using some Bootstrap here. And this is the top row where you see the about. So we'll color this in a little bit. This is the space that I'm interested in. What I want to do is when I go to, let's say, fetch data, I want to maybe add something up here in this top bar. So I want to make the top bar a section that I can make changes to or add content to on the fly. And please, if you have questions, pop them into chat. Be more than happy to try to answer them live here on the show. All right, so how do I make, let's say I want to add something to this about thing. Maybe I want to go to fetch data and I want to have a help page that's dedicated directly to this fetch data page. Maybe I want it to say, since this is weather forecast, weather help, and then leave the about there, but I want to be able to add that. So currently there's no way to do that in Blazor without, again, setting up some kind of state management that allows me to talk to the state, and then the main page or main layout would have to subscribe to that state and display those additions. And again, that creates kind of a cross dependency between that state management and other components possibly, or custom classes. It just gets into a whole lot of code that just really is unnecessary. So instead, in .NET 8, what we can do is come up here, and actually we need a using statement first. These are not included out of the box. Let's go ahead and drop that using statement in. We're going to say using. Thank you, IntelliSense, but no thank you. Using, it's going to be Microsoft, ASP.NET Core, components, and then it should be under components, sections. And the sections actually are components, so they're in the right place there. Don't know why IntelliSense wasn't. I just typed using and it said attributes. Might want to note that later for filing a bug report with the Razor team. All right, so now that we have the sections namespace here, we can come into this area. Again, this is where the about link was up in the right-hand corner of the template. We can say section outlet. Outlet's getting to be a familiar syntax for Blazor. An outlet is kind of a place in our application where we want to write out some content. Usually this is a render fragment that's getting displayed somewhere in the app. We have these in the head of our application. We have a head outlet. I'll show those in a minute if anybody's interested in seeing those. But section outlet is what we're using today. So section outlet is going to go here. We're going to give it a section name. And since I have top row, I'm going to call this before top row. This is going to be displayed before any of the content in the top row. Naming things is hard. Maybe there's a better name for that. I'm going to call it before top row now, just for demo purposes. Now, the naming conventions I'm using here, since I'm using section name and that is a string, I'm going to go with the HTML style of naming this. So if we name IDs or classes or anything else in HTML, we use this kebab case syntax here. So we've got before dash top dash row. That just makes things nice and familiar because we're going to need to remember this name in just a moment. So if we want to take and write something to this section from another view in the application, what we need to do, when I say view, I also mean component. I'm going to jump over to show data. We should probably save this. We'll jump over to show data. Let's put these side by side for a moment. Just makes it a little easier to get the concept. Anywhere on this page, and again, here's one of those outlets I was talking about. Page title. Page title doesn't really exist in the rendering of this component. Instead, there's an outlet for page title. That outlet is in, depends on what type of app you have. In this case, again, this is a new template here, so it's usually going to be in the index HTML. This one looks like it's an app.razor, but there's that head outlet. So we'll swap these over for a minute. Page title gets rendered out in the head outlet. And this is a similar concept that we're going to use again. So instead of page title rendering in the head outlet, we want to render in the section outlet. To do that, this can go anywhere in the component. We are going to use SectionContent. And it's using the full namespace here because I have to use this using statement. Let's go ahead and move this using statement up to imports.razor, so we don't have to keep typing it in. And then I should be able to write out section content that way. All right. So we have section outlet, section content. We'll go ahead and name that one section name. And then again, we need to know the section name. It's going to be a magic string here. Not a big fan of that part. We'll fix that later. All right. So we have before top row, and then let's go ahead and plop a new link in there. Just so I don't have to type a bunch, we'll steal this one. And we'll just change the text on it. So this one's going to be weather help. Okay. So now what I'd hope to see when I run this app is that when we're on the home page, we have the about link up at the top. And then when I go to my show data page, that weather page, that we should be rendering another link up here at the top. So let's make this a little bit smaller so we can see it all happening in one space. I'm going to click here on fetch data. And now I have weather help. Go back to home, no longer a link there. So now I have this section that's being influenced by a component that is further down in the hierarchy. So we don't have ways of communicating with parents in the hierarchy of a Blazor applications view normally without, again, some kind of advanced state management. This is really nice and easy to make this type of thing happen. And you're like, well, this is Blazor Power Hour. We're only 20 minutes in, and this is all we've got. There's actually some more to this that's really pretty cool. Let's go ahead and close that out. The next thing is there's no discoverability with this, in my opinion. So it's a nice feature, but if I'm not, maybe this is a much more complex project. I'm not the developer that wrote the main layout. I'm working on show data.razor, and I really need to access some part of the layout, but I don't know all the inner workings of the layout system. Maybe there's more than just main layout. Maybe there's many layouts that are nested. How am I going to know that there's this possible content section that I can attach to? And with this magic string here, it doesn't give me a whole lot of discoverability, no IntelliSense, none of that. It'd have to be like manually documented somewhere in the application's documentation. You know how great developers are at documenting things. We're not. So it's actually a nice feature that is already part of the section outlet. And that is, instead of using section name, we convert this to section ID. Now it's going to take a little bit more work than just adding a magic string here. So we do, in fact, need a code block for this now. But what we're going to do is create a name that is an actual object and assign that as the ID. So what I want here is this is going to be a section content, and it needs to be, a public static section content. And then this is going to be the top or before. I'm going to change the naming conventions here. It's not going to be kebab case because it's now a C# class. So we're going to go follow the C# conventions. Before top row is going to be the name of it. And I need to new one of these section contents up. Now in section ID, I can come in here and say before top row. And what's nice is I'm already getting some IntelliSense here. So you can imagine, come on, catch up IntelliSense. Oh, I forgot my code statement here. That's probably what's throwing it off. Surprise IntelliSense worked at that point, but it did. All right, so now that I have this, in my section content on my show data page, I don't have to really know too much about the main layout. Matter of fact, we'll take it off screen and I'll say section ID, and I can say in that main layout is there, oh, look at that, before top row. That made it a little bit better. So I do have some IntelliSense there. Now, you might be thinking it's not quite as discoverable as you'd hope it to be. We can still improve upon that. But if we run the application and we take a look, this is working the exact same way as it did with that string version. I prefer the coded version better because we can do some more nice things with it. So one of the things is we can do some triple comments here, and we can write a summary, and we can say this is a section content for the top display of the application. We could write something intelligent about what is going to be represented by that section content. And when we are in our other component, that message will show up in IntelliSense here. So that's nice. We have some documentation going for us. All right. Now, what's even better, in my opinion, is we could make this type a little bit more complex, and that might give us a little more insight as to where these sections live. So let's go ahead and do that. And I keep bumping this button on my keyboard. Sorry about that. Let's do a class. It needs to be a public static class for this to work properly. And then we'll go ahead and move this inside of it, and we will name this class sections. All right, that doesn't really do a whole lot to the section content object itself, but it does give us some organization. So check this out now, and this is my opinion of how you might want to write these. This isn't anything that is an official documented feature or anything like that. This is just me thinking outside the box, trying to see how would I make this more discoverable to other developers on the team that might be using this layout. So go back to show data. Now watch the IntelliSense here, and you could see where this might be handy. So under section ID, I'm going to say, well, maybe there's some sections in my main layout. Well, there's some sections there. And in sections, I have a top row before, and I have a nice description inside of there provided by those triple comments that lets me know what the intention of that section is. And if I have multiple sections within that layout, I can put them all underneath of this public static class named sections. And if I make this a good habit in all of the layouts and name all of my sections under these static classes of sections, then I'll have a nice, organized, discoverable way of finding these sections. So there's a couple more things that we could do with sections that we can talk about here. Some questions you might have is, what if I want some content here by default, but if I use the section outlet, then I want that content to go away? I believe we can open these up like this, and we can wrap the section outlet around some content. This is all valid. And then if I were to do this, I'd probably change the name. We'll kind of keep it short here and just leave it alone for now. We might write in the comments, oh, I got an unhandled exception. I thought that was, does not have a property matching child content. Oh, I remember what it is. If you do this, we actually need to use the section outlet directly. So we need to do, we can do it, but what we need to do is it has to be within a section content right beneath it. So if you want it to replace the content, you would do it like this. The last consumer of that section outlet will display its content. So this one will render first, and then the show data will replace it. Let's see if I got that right this time. All right, so we have about, and now when we go to fetch data, it should replace about, and now we have weather help. So if you wanted to set that up as a template that gets overwritten if somebody assigns some content to it, that's how you would do it. So you still need to utilize the section content portion because there is no render fragment or child content of a section outlet. It's being displayed by the section content. So if you put one immediately after it, it will render it in place, and then you can overwrite that through other components. So that's another nice feature. I also mentioned, like we have before, you can have multiple of these. So if we duplicate that and move that down, and then we also duplicate this, you could have an after, and then we might want to remove that off of there, take that feature out. So now we have a before and after. Fix this guy up as well. Call that one after top row. Now we have about, and instead of replacing it, we can put content before or after it. And now we have control over both of those sections. So if we go into here, we could add a second link if we wanted to, or we could just control which side of that about we want this to display on. If we go in here, you can see now that we did this, we have two sections. We have a before and an after. So if we assign that to after now and run it, we will get the word about and then weather help. So we'll drop this back over here and expand that back. So we have about, we're not going to replace it this time, we're going to append to it. This time we're appending after it. So we have multiple sections now. And then of course, if you want to go, you know, with the full replaceable everything, you could even duplicate that guy one more time. You could just say this one is top row, and then you would immediately emit the section content with the same section ID here. Open that up and then plop your about link inside of it. And now you have full control. Of course, you need to create another one of these. And now you have, I mean, this gets kind of crazy, but it also makes some very nice templating features. So we have our top row. We can replace the top row by using the top row section. We can append before it or prepend to it or we can append to it. How about that? So we can go on either side of it, or we can replace it completely. So we've got full control there as well. This is an oversimplified way of doing this, and we still have 30 minutes left. So let's do even more. All right. So we've done before, we've done after, we've done replace. Let me pull up some code here on the side. So I can throw it on my other monitor so you don't have to watch me write all this stuff by hand. Let me open, it's probably easier for me to find through here. I was tinkering with some things earlier, and I would like to reuse some code for the show today. So I need to find my source code for my repos, and I have a project I was working on. Where did it go? Oh, I don't have it on here. Code was on a different machine. So my laptop I use in another room where I can kind of tinker on things in my spare time. I kind of left it up there. But I want to do some stuff that's going to be rather complex, but very quickly. So I need to do a little copy paste, or at least have some reference. Can't remember all this stuff off the top of my head, right? We're going to go into main layout. And as much as you want to love this template that we're given here, what if I want to create a brand new template of my own with no bootstrap, just a brand new templated Blazor application that uses sections. It looks really nice. Let's go ahead and write something from scratch. I'm going to go ahead and nuke the entire main layout. So no more main layout here. Instead, what I'd like to do is have, let's use our little drawing tool here. I want a layout that has a header, a footer, and it has a content area. But then I want a 2-column layout and a 3-column layout, like that. And I want this main layout to kind of use either or of those. So I can just specify a 1 or 2-column layout or a 3-column layout. And then I want to be able to control the top section, the footer, the sidebar, or the other sidebar through sections. So this is where sections can be really powerful. So the first thing I need is this layout component base. That is the main building block of any layout. So we'll keep this as main layout.razor. We also have a main layout razor CSS. We're going to get rid of all that. We're going to delete it all. And we are going to create a brand new layout here. So what I like to do with these is use CSS Grid. CSS Grid is your friend, and it really makes creating HTML layouts nice and easy. I'm going to drop this over on the side. So we have our main layout razor and our main layout CSS, and we're going to write some HTML and CSS today. All right, so the first thing I want to do is drop in a div, and we'll give this guy a class of wrapper. And I'll explain what each of these does as we get along here, but the main thing is I need something to wrap all of the content so I can assign certain widths, heights, etc. We'll create another div, and we'll call this one class grid container. This is going to be the main grid of our layout. And then let's go ahead and start with those. So we've got our wrapper, and I'm going to write some CSS now. And let's see here. I need in my wrapper, this is going to be a height of 100%. And this is going to ensure that the body of the content here so we're going to ensure that we're pushing all of the content down. We're going to kind of stick the footer at the bottom of our application. That's what our wrapper is going to help us take care of. And then for the grid container, I love CSS grid. And what grid container is going to do for us is supply the grid. So we need to set that to display grid. Right? CSS grid, if you're not familiar, comes with a feature of setting up columns and rows. This is going to be our have the header column or header row, the footer row, and then our body row. So we've got 3 rows there. To do that, we will assign the grid row, grid template rows, and we're going to assign those to auto. So the header is going to be automatic, the body is going to be 1 fraction, and the footer will be automatic. So auto, 1 fraction, auto. So what that's going to tell my layout to do is that header will take up as much space as it needs, so will the footer. The remainder of the layout will be 1 fraction, or all of the space that the header and footer are not using. Okay, so we've got that. Let's put a little white space in there, so we'll have a row gap between the header, the footer, and the body of 2 relative EM units. And then we'll also give it a minimum height of 100%. Again, this is going to help stick that footer at the bottom of the page. And then just so we can see where things are, we'll give it a background color. Color of white smoke. Gives it just an off-white color for us to be able to see it well. All right. We should be able to run this. And no, we can't. We're still defining sections in our component. We'll go ahead and get rid of that. We're not using that section anymore. That was from the first demo we did. We're on to completely rewriting the template here. We have a blank page. This is on purpose. It should be that white smoke color. It's a little bit hard to tell without any other contrast on the page. So let's go ahead and add some more elements here. We need a header and a footer for this. So let's see here. We need to put in, let's use an actual header element. We'll use some semantic HTML here. This is going to be our header. Let's just put some placeholder text here for now, just so we can see it displayed. We'll move these into sections very shortly after. I'm going to put another one here called div. We'll give it a class. Class of content. It's going to be where the body of our app goes. We'll use the at body directive there. So that is the where all of the components for this layout will be rendered if they are not in a section. And then we need to have a footer, not food. Auto completed that one weird. I didn't know food was a tag. Footer. We got a footer tag now. So we've got our header, our main body, our footer. You might be wondering why I didn't use something like main in there. There's a whole set of semantics about HTML. That main would actually be a good choice, but we're going to have sub layouts for this. And if we put main there, it could throw off some of those other layouts. So for now, we're just going to use content. And let's see, for our footer, we'll just throw in some placeholder text there as well. And we will say copyright. Let's just put a date in there, 2023. This would be some fancy copyright text. You can tell I'm not a lawyer. All right, so we've got our header, our footer, our body. We have some placeholders set up, so we should be able to see where these things render. We need some more CSS, though, to make sure we can tell where these areas are, these will be sections are. We need a header. Whoops, I wrote that wrong. It should be no period in front of it because it's an HTML element. Background, we'll assign it a color. Let's pick a favorite color here. Let's do some, blue's pretty harsh in this, isn't it? Background color, let's find something that's not going to scream at us too bad. I like this turquoise, that's pretty cool. We'll use that as our header, and then for the footer, let's do a background color, and let's see, we've got, let's do purple. We'll do purple for that, and this is just so we can identify where those sections are. The color here will probably need to be white, so we can see the text on it. Do the same here. This is just for aesthetics, folks. All right, let's render that out and see what it looks like. All right, so we've got our header, our hello world. We don't have that sticky footer quite working yet, and I believe that's just because the HTML elements, if you're using a max height, it's a bit hacky. Just CSS in general can be a bit hacky at times, but what I think we need here is we need 100% height on the body and the HTML elements, and that should do it. So we're going to come in here where this font is being assigned on HTML and body, and we're going to say height 100%. And then let's go ahead and clear the margins on this as well. Margin 0, padding 0. Zero those guys out because we're going to do some nice work with paddings and white space as well. And I'm still missing something here. This should extend down to the bottom of the page, and it can be quite tricky sometimes to get that right. Let's go ahead and continue. We'll see if we clear that up with some other CSS code that I've got. We're setting all the building blocks in place to get that sticky footer written for us. So we've got our wrapper height there. Let's double check some code here. We've got our CSS grid. That is all set as well. We are missing our container. So we have content. We have content. I think that should be container, not content. All right, so this should be container, and that container is going to house some different types of content. Container, and then that container is going to be a width of 80%. Okay. It's going to have a max width of 1,100 pixels, and then we'll do margin of auto on that. So what this is going to do is our container here is only going to ever be either 80% the width of the browser or a maximum of 1,100 pixels. The reason I'm doing that is because people have these ultra widescreen monitors. And you can see here now that it's kind of floating over on the side, it will never get bigger than that width because these ultra widescreen monitors, things get a little crazy if you go for the 100% width. As you can see, the header would be way off to the side of the room on that side. We don't want that. So we're going to wrap containers around these as well. So we have our header component. And inside of our header component, we want to go ahead and add some of these divs with the container attribute applied to it, or the container class applied to it. I want to do that for footer as well. And this is going to line everything up nice and neat. And now if I run it again, I should have some nice white space around the outside. And I blew something up here. So there's a little bit of a height issue here somewhere as well. We'll go ahead and figure that out and fix it. Let's see, I've got 3 containers. I have my header wrapping those containers. What am I doing different on my sample? So I've got my grid, I've got auto, gap, height 100, max, width, auto, height is 100% on the wrapper. Do I have any misspellings in here? This is wrapper, doesn't look like a misspelling. So we have wrapper, grid container, our header, our container, and under the container is our body and my footer and another container. Everything looks okay. I'm not sure. I've got comments coming in. Does footer and header need to be defined variable? No, they're not variables. Section content is nicer for something like Orchard. Yeah, I bet it would be good for CMS capabilities with Blazor. What's the other one? Not Orchard. Octane. Octane, I think, will probably take advantage of this. Trying to remember what it is that I'm doing wrong here. My header exploded. These should be set to auto in my grid, so I don't know why they're going so large here. So I've got grid container. Oh, there's my error. Auto 1FR. Invalid property value. So something in my grid is defined incorrectly. Template rows. Oh, I missed the R on FR. Would you look at that? That should have been fraction. I just put 1F. And F is not a value, so it made everything go crazy. There we go. All right. Don't know why the content's aligning to the middle. I'm going to check that real fast and see what's going on here. Max width, header at the body. Container content there. Very, very strange. That should not be in the center. Not centering that. I don't know where it's getting that style from. Yeah. There's probably something in, let me try one more thing here. This does have Bootstrap still being applied to it. Let's go to app.razor and we will yank out the Bootstrap min file there and rerun it. Make sure that it's not Bootstrap doing this. It is not Bootstrap. I can see it on my other screen there. Let's see what else we have. There is a CSS file in here. We don't need any of this except for the Blazor dash stuff and the validation. Let's try nuking some of that out of there. This is one of those works on my machine moments. So everything's working on my sample that I created for this. I do not get this centered text there. Some of the stuff is starting to work better, but still got a weird centering issue. We'll move past this, though. We will move past this because we need to talk about sections again. So for some reason, our container is having an interesting feature, we'll call it, where it is centering the item and it shouldn't be. Might be able to fix that within a line. I didn't have to do it on my other demo, so I'm not quite sure what it is causing that. Let me look at it one more second. Let's do inspect. It would probably be in our grid, maybe. We can do align items. Start. No, that is not it. Content. Justify content. Oh, that is not it. Definitely not it. Line content start. No. All right. I don't know what is giving that as, like, when you don't want to center things in, or when you want to center things in CSS, you don't easily get those until CSS grid came along, but now, oh, where did that margin auto come from? I've got it in my source code, but it looks like, yeah, that is incorrect. That should be margin left and margin right auto. I don't know how I didn't catch that on my sample I made. There we go. That's better. So I want automatic margins. This way, it was doing it all the way around. I was getting margins on the top and bottom as well. And you are right. That is one way of centering things with CSS. I was centering them vertically. I didn't want that. All right, so now we've got our header and our footer, and we only have this one content section, which is the main body. But now what's really cool is we can come back into our shared folder here and do add Razor component. And we can create a 2-column layout. So it's going to be our 2-column layout. Once again, we need to inherit from our component base. And then we will use the layout of main layout. And now we're going to take the main layout, and inside of this body tag, we are going to continue adding things to the layout. So now I can have a 2-column layout, and I can also make a 3-column layout. So we're going to use CSS isolation again. So I'm going to come in here and hit add new item. I like this new feature, by the way. You just add a brand new item, and it can be anything. To column .razor.css. We'll hit add, and that will marry up a CSS file for us. We're going to put this on this side, and we'll remove the body here. And on this side, we are going to have a div class is going to be grid. This is going to be our main grid for the page. And the grid for this 2-column layout, we will just do a selector of div grid. This is using CSS isolation, so I don't have to be super particular about my selectors. And we will do display grid here. And we will use grid template columns this time because we're dealing with columns, and we'll do 2 fractions. Make sure I get the R in there this time. Put another fraction of 5, so it's 2 by 5, and a column gap of 2 rems. So now I've got a 2-column layout within this grid. So let's create some content in this grid. To do that, first of all, what will body represent here? So if we use body, body is going to be the where the components are rendered by this layout. So this is where we want to have some semantics around the layout. So we didn't put any real semantic meaning here. We have a body here. This is where our 2-column layout will be rendered. This is the final layout that will be used on the page. We want to create some elements within this. So the first column we want to be nav. We're going to have a navigation column. The second column will be main, and this will be the main content. These elements have semantic meaning in HTML, and that's why I'm using them here. So this will be our nav. On that side, we'll put a placeholder in so we can render this out. We need to go back to our pages now, and on our index page, let's go ahead and tell it to use the 2-column layout. So we'll say layout 2 columns. And now we should be able to run this. And we have a 2-column layout. We have our header, we have our navigation on the side, and we have our main content in the center. So what does all this have to do with sections? Well, what if we want to control this navigation sidebar? Hey, Mr. Magoo, you missed most of it, yes. But we're going to recap very shortly here. We're going to put in some sections. We're focusing on Blazor sections today, which is a .NET preview feature. And we just built a whole layout from scratch. We wrote some CSS and everything. All right, so let's add those magic bits that give us sections. So the first thing I might want to do is come into my main layout here and allow the header to be replaced here. So let's go ahead and add a section to this. This is going to be a SectionContent, or nope, sorry, SectionOutlet. SectionOutlet, we'll give it a section ID. Let's not name it quite yet. We will just identify that that is where it's going to go. We're going to have a body already, but we'll go ahead and just for semantic, or not even semantics, just discoverability, we'll go ahead and drop one there. and then we'll put one here as well. And again, we can get as detailed about these sections as we'd like. Go ahead and throw a code block in, and we want a section outlet. We want a public static class. I'm going to actually change this modifier to internal, so it's not available outside of the application. We'll make this a internal static class of sections. Again, this naming convention I'm using here is not, this is my opinion only. This is not necessarily something you have to do. This next part is, we need section content, which also needs to be public or internal static. Jeez, wish I could type today. And we need to name this. One's going to be header. So there is our section content. Bring back the power glove. Yes, I've been busy. Sorry, I haven't been able to stream lately, but I'm back for now. We'll try to do this regularly again. Body is completely unnecessary, but I'm going to add it just in case, just as a nice have feature. And then we will have a footer as well. And then up here, we can say sections dot header, sections footer. Oops, that's not the footer, that's the body. I'll show you why I added that body in just a minute. Again, this is a very opinionated thing. Sections footer. All right, so there's our 3 sections. And again, we could come in here and we could add comments to these as well. In my example here, I don't have it there. There's some good practices that I'll write about in my blog post about what you can put in here, about what the sections are for and what semantics they have. Was there a raid? Oh, there was a huge raid. Holy moly. Didn't come up in StreamYard. Came up in Twitch, though. Thank you for the raid, C# Fritz. Hello, everybody that's just joining us now. So I'll recap again. We are dealing with Blazor sections. Blazor sections are part of .NET Preview 4. I'm on .NET Preview 5 now. I'm in Visual Studio 2022 preview. And we just wiped out the Blazor template that ships with Blazor and started writing a brand new template. This is what it looks like. Now I'm adding in sections with the new Blazor sections feature, so my components can have control over where they're rendering elements within that layout. So hopefully that brings you up to speed. This is called the Blazor Power Hour. It's supposed to be done at 11 o'clock. I'm going long today because I haven't done this in a really long time, so stick around. So sections. Sections in Blazor, I'll recap again what those exactly are. It's a 2-piece system. So we have outlets and we have content. So in, let's see here, in my main layout, which we're looking at right here on the screen, you'll see section outlet. For each section outlet, if I want to render something from another component, I will use a section content component. And if it has a matching section ID, these could be magic strings. I talked about this early on. The magic strings are nice, but these are nicer. I can use actual section content objects to identify the section ID. And this gives me some nice API around where those sections are, how to find them, discoverability. and you can leave comments on them as well. So for example, here I could write a summary that says the main header of the entire application, and that will show up in IntelliSense when I'm hovering over that item. I would never ban you, Thindle. All right. So we wrote some CSS. We'll do another one of these in a minute. We'll create a whole third layout just for you new folks that showed up. So we have our main layout. The main layout has the header, the body, and the footer. The 2-column layout has a navigation and a body. We haven't created the sections for that yet. I'm just going to kind of hijack these, though. They're going to be pretty similar. Just give me a template kind of to go off of. And I probably should have grabbed the whole code block here. If you ever watched the show, you know I don't like to type, and I'll just copy and paste as I see fit. So we don't have a header on this one. We have a nav, and we have a body. And for reference, if you just joined, the body section is completely unnecessary. I'm just adding it for just a nicer API, which we'll see in a minute how that works. But we'll also copy these over. We'll drop that in the navigation. We'll drop this one. I will drop it after the body, and we'll see how that works. Now, this needs to be the nav section. Notice I have 2 content sections now that say body. What I need to do when I reference these from the outside, you'll see this internal static class that I gave it makes it really nice. Yeah, ASP.NET Core is full of magic strings, and that's why I'm using these static classes instead, is to get rid of those magic strings. I don't like magic strings. They usually are very unintuitive to the end user. So index.razor uses a 2-column layout. Right now, it is only using the body section of that layout. We look at these side by side. The content here is being rendered at the body over there. So this content gets rendered there in main. That's where it's ending up now that I added this 2-column layout. So now I have sections. I can actually add some navigation here. This navigation, in my opinion, would be within this component. So it'd be kind of a sub-navigation. It wouldn't be your whole entire site navigation. You'd want that up the hierarchy further. But it's nice to have the ability to target this second column as a sub-navigation. So what we need to do to actually use it is say content, section content, and then section ID. And here's the really cool part about using that static class is now I can say, what layout do I want to display content in? Well, I want the 2-column layout that I'm using. You can see the layout up here is the 2-column layout. And in that 2-column layout, I type sections, and now I have all of the sections that belong only to the 2-column layout. So what I can do here is say I want the navigation section, and this is where I'm going to write some kind of nav. A href equals whatever, and we could drop an anchor tag and do some sub navigation. We could have some routes in here, whatever we need. Let's go ahead and just leave that as a route on that. Again, if it was going to be top level site navigation, I'd put this somewhere else, but this is just for an example. So we can say back home, something like that in there. We've got, we'll light theme. What kind of animal are you? I literally installed this Visual Studio 10 minutes before the show started. This is Visual Studio Preview. So this is about as default as Visual Studio gets. 2 or 3 cursors, 3 or 4 cursors. Am I moving that quickly that it's making multiple cursors? Speaking of which, is there some way to get adaptive cards in a build? Blazor Century. I don't know what adaptive cards are. What's adaptive cards? Kind of out of the loop on adaptive cards, I guess. So this is in the body, these items. This is in the nav now. So we run this. We should have just a plain old anchor tag on the left. And I botched something because I haven't, I didn't put any header content. So we need 2 content sections here. So the 2-column layout uses the main layout. It has page title here. Let's go ahead and add this up by the page title. We have content, section content here as well. And that section content has a section ID of main layout. You can see where this is getting really interesting, because now we can control both the header of the application and that nav sidebar. I'm going to put index in here as well. I want that to be H1 index, right? So I've got section content header, but it's main layout sections header. This one's 2-column layout sections nav. And then this is my body. And this is where I said it's a nice have to possibly have the content section of body, because you can give this a little bit more semantic meaning, as a, not semantic as in semantic HTML, but just as developer experience. You could go ahead and wrap this around. You could say, sorry, wrong one, 2-column layout body, and it will appear in the same location, but you'll get the tags around it, defining exactly where that content is going to show. So that might be a nice have feature if that's something you wanted to add to your layouts, but it's optional. So we'll draw that out on the screen, and there we go. So we have our header written out from the page. So the page called it index. We have a back home that was written from here. Again, main navigation for the site, might want to change that up a bit. This would be like a sub nav. Main nav probably go up here somewhere. But we can control all these elements from within the component. One nice thing in that side navigation might be some filtering mechanisms for a view. Maybe you've got some data on a grid, that sort of thing. All right, so we've got a 2-column layout. We've got our main layout. Let's add a 3-column layout. Then we can really see where this shines, because then we can have 2 different types of layouts to use. Adaptive cards. I can't copy links out of this one. I'll have to check that out later. Adaptive cards. It sounds familiar. I know the terminology. I just can't place what you do with it. HTML feature that currently has no longer being developed. Ouch. Oh, okay. Now I remember what that is. It's like a data semantic thing, like a data representation. I think they started doing those with like chatbots or something. So like everybody could format certain types of data the same way. Yeah, it's no problem. It's all good. I had heard that name a long time ago. I think it came with the Microsoft chatbot. So we have our suite of layouts here so far. We have main, 2-column. We're going to add another one. We'll do add razor component, and we will say 3-column layout razor, and then we'll add new item, and we'll say 3-column layout razor dot css, and then add that. So now we've got 2 more items here. We'll pop those. I like doing my CSS and my HTML side by side. And then on this one, and if you're just joining from the raid, I do have a cheat sheet over here. I'm not doing all this out of my head. I do have some samples that I was coding up earlier. So I'm going to have a div class grid here. Love CSS grid. Going to use that again. This is something that might be a little confusing. HTML has section, and then there are section content sections. We're talking about strict HTML section here right now, which is just a way of being more explicit about what this div would do. It's a section of the layout, and this one is going to be sidebar. Again, another kind of sub-navigation type of thing. I got really specific on this one. Let's leave it at that for now. So we've got section. We'll do main again. This is going to be the main part of the application, and then the third part is going to be an aside. So the different meanings for these, this is a section of the application that has some different meaning than the main section. So this is generally, again, like a sub-navigation, some sort of filtering mechanisms, a sidebar of some sort that is not necessarily directly related to the main element. The aside is somewhat indirectly related to the main. So these are all just different definitions of pieces of our document that we can use. Oh, this is nice. I didn't know Visual Studio did this. It's hard to see here. It's kind of ghosted out. Section element represents a generic section of the document or application. So it actually tells you what this means. An aside is a representation of a section of a page. The content is tangentially related to the content around it. So you do get the actual meanings of these in Visual Studio. I don't know if that's a preview feature or not. I don't remember it doing that before. So that's a nice have. Love it. I hope they keep adding features like that. All right, so we need to write some CSS for all this stuff now. So div.grid. This is the one thing that I do like about CSS isolation is it makes the layout stuff easier. The semantics or the what do you call it? Not semantics, darn it. The syntax for writing these things out. I like to be able to focus on that and not naming everything that I put on the page, and this makes naming things easier. So display is grid, and then grid template columns again. And this time we're going to have a 2-fraction column, a 3-fraction column, and a 1-fraction column. So the center column will be the largest. The third column will be the smallest. So the center one will be 3 times the size of the right-hand column, and the left-hand column will be twice the size of the right-hand column. That's how those measurements work out. Column gap. This is going to be the white space between each of those items, and we'll call that 2 rems. All right. Now we can add some CSS to the section on the side as well. So the sidebar section, I definitely want to use that for some kind of subnav. So we will say display flex. The flex direction is going to be a column, and row gap is going to be 2 rems. And again, this is something you might want to comment in your section information, is that this is going to be a specific section for a navigation, and it already is going to flow the layout for a navigation. Because we did just assign some HTML semantics to it, and also some styling that supports what it is our intentions are for that section. Looking for an easy way to get Material 3 into HTML and Blazor? Material 3? I'm not familiar with Material 3. Is that just the latest version of the material design stuff? If you've watched this show ever, you know what I'm going to say. Just use the Telerik material theme. I got to pay for the show somehow, guys. Come on. Should add a name attribute to your HTML section. I don't think that's a requirement. This is just a generic HTML section. They don't have to have name identifiers for accessibility or anything that I'm aware of. But we do need the Blazor sections in here. So I'm going to, again, steal this block of code from this one, just so I don't have to write this whole block out again. And I will plonk that down there. And I have, instead of nav, let's call this one. We have an alternative. We have a body. Actually, this one's main. I should have done that in the other one. This is main. Because it's a main element. Let's actually go back and fix that. It's going to be main. And then the page that uses it is going to be angry if I don't say main there as well. All right, so just keep up with the naming conventions here. 2 column, 3 column, 3 column layout main, and then we will duplicate that and say aside. Then in these things here, you might want to say let's see if I can do this, at GT, that means greater than section at, at LT section ampersand GT element representing the layout's first column. This is the kind of information you could add to make these things a little more intelligent. You could add really robust comments like this. This one is going to be main element representing the layout's middle column. And then you can put also in this a second line that says this is the default. It uses the body of the layout component like that. So you can give information to other developers using this layout as they're typing these things in. They get the HTML meaning of what these mean, or what these are. Fix that. Representing the last column So this way, if you're going to use these layouts, when you start typing these in, what did I do wrong there? Section, I'm missing a set of parentheses or something around it. Greater than, less than, missing the less than. It looks weird. It's on the wrong side of it. This actually needs to go over. That needs to go there. Is that right? Yeah, that's better. I don't know why I'm getting a space around it. Did I put a space in there? Accidentally did. So if you zoom in, you can see what that looks like. So it's telling, whoever's going to use this, I have a main tag. It's a main element. Main element that represents the layout's middle column. It's the default and uses the body of the layout component. So that kind of tells you that it's optional, but at least it tells you that it's going to be inside of a main, because you don't want to have whoever consumes this to write yet another main inside of it, because that's going to break your screen readers and stuff. So you might want to put in comments like, what is this being nested inside of, so you don't mess those things up. Like, you can just put your main application in here now, not worry about that main tag. We already took care of that for you. So section content, or section outlet rather. Goes here, section outlet, section ID, and then we can say sections. And then this is going to be the alternative column here, alternative navigation. These should be self-closing in my opinion. I goofed that up. Make that a self-closing tag. Drop 2 more of these in. This one will say main. This one will say is aside. So we're kind of reinforcing the fact that this is a main tag, this is an aside tag, and what those tags are by the comments. And the comments are a little wacky on some of them. I'm not worried about the details in this demo so much. Oh, the reason body just got underscored here, I forgot one of the big important things up at the top. This needs to be inheriting from a layout component base, and it also needs the layout from main layout to work properly. And then there you can see the body just stopped being undersquiggled. Now I can make use of this 3-column layout. So now I've got a 2-column and a 3-column. Let's go over to the page show data, and in show data we can change this around a little bit. Let's make use of all of those things now. We've got our content, section content, section ID equals main layout, sections, header. It's going to go in the header of the main layout. Let's go ahead and put weather forecast in there. And then this component demonstrates showing data from a server. Let's go ahead and take that, put it in section ID of 3-column layout, sections dot aside. That's going to go off on our very far or last column, the end column, however you want to say that. We also need to come up here and say that this is going to be the layout of 3 column layout. If we didn't do that, if I would have left this blank, it would have chosen the main layout. And what's interesting is if there's a content section and it does not fall into any section defined in the layout, it just doesn't get displayed. So if you have a section you defined and the content doesn't render for some reason, you're going to be like, oh, where did that go and why? And sometimes the reason is you're just not using the right layout and there's no errors that are thrown. This one is optional, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is going to be the 3 column layout section main. Again, it's the body, so it's implied, but we'll be explicit here and just go ahead and put it in, just so everything has a container around it. If we didn't do that, everything would just kind of float around the middle. It kind of gets a little confusing in my opinion. Now everything has a nice collapsible section that it's in case I need to edit something in here. I can easily kind of get a grip on what's happening. So I'm not using the alt side yet. Let's go ahead and put something in there, even though it's going to be fake. Section content, section ID. Notice these are out of order. They don't have to go in any particular order. They will find the correct sections and render there. So even though the alt is on the left side and the aside is on the right side, the order of the source code doesn't matter. And then in here we might have some links to stuff. And we'll just drop a couple fictitious links in here. Just for demo purposes. Maybe these are days. Let's do that. Maybe they're filters for the days of the week or something. Abbreviated some and not others, who cares? Let's see what this does. All right, so our home page is making use of that 2 column layout. So we've got a nav on this side, we've got content on this side. I don't have any real navigation here though, so we'll have to go directly to show data, but there's show data. And you can see I dropped Bootstrap, that's why there's no fancy stuff around that. But I've got my side navigation there, I've got my aside message on the right-hand side now, and my main data in the center. So I've got a 3 column layout, and they're not 100% responsive. As far as responsive web goes, they're close. They're very flexible because of that CSS grid. And with a simple media query, I could fix all of that and make it totally responsive. But there's our 2 different layouts right there. We've got the 3 column and the 2 column. It's actually nested layouts too. They are using the header. If you notice that, this one says index. I'm writing into that header section. This one says weather forecast. I'm writing right into that header section. And I never made use of the footer one. I could come in there and do that as well. Let's go into show data. We'll go ahead and attach to that. We can say section content, section ID equals 3 column layout, section. Oop, it's part of the main, isn't it? Main layout, sections, footer. There's our footer. All right. In here we could, this one's going to append to the footer section. And we could say weather provided by Maybe we're using a third-party service that requires some sort of, what do you call it, recognition, attribution, I guess is the right word. EJC, by the way, is just my initials. Nothing super clever there. So if we were to go to our fetch data page, I don't know why they changed it to show data from fetch data. Maybe it's not fetching anything. But you can see this page. Ultra zoom. You can see we've got the added message at the bottom in that footer. So you see where some of this stuff might come in handy. Where before the section API was added, if we had a view like this where, say, we're getting some data and they're like, we want our attribution in the footer of the website, you're like, okay, now I've got to set up a whole like pub sub state management thing where a component can publish some sort of data that gets consumed by a component that's sitting in the footer that's waiting for something to be defined by the state. And then if the state changes, I need to make sure I call state has changed here to make sure it shows up because it's outside the render tree, yada, yada, yada. Now you just use section. And that's pretty awesome. So we've got editable, a customizable footer section. We've got our 3-column layout and our 2-column layout. 2 columns, 3 columns. Pretty cool. So that's how you can do multiple columns, multiple layouts with different sections all over the place. I did leave this one here. If you weren't part of the show earlier, I'll show this again. This header section doesn't have a default. So if I left my header blank on weather forecast, let's go ahead and just comment this out, run the app again. It disappears completely. So this might not be the intended behavior here. So notice I've got no more header. That header just vanished. The div is still there, but it's empty, so it's collapsed completely. You can't see it anymore. There's no content inside of it because I commented out that H1 tag. What you could do is if you don't want that behavior, you could go back into that layout and see where it says section outlet. You can make use of the section content directly here. Section ID, section content, nope, sections dot header. And inside of this, I could put H1 untitled. We'll save that. And now if I don't set it, it'll at least have something in it. So the main layout, this one, index is used in that section, so it removes or supersedes the content that was there. But in show data, I have nothing set. Why isn't it showing up? All right, this is making me look silly. Why did it not show up? I should have. This worked earlier. Why isn't it working now? Oh, I have it defined. With no content in it. That makes perfect sense. Let me comment the entire thing out. My bad. So if I don't define the section at all, not just empty content, but no section, if I don't make use of that section, I can provide a default. There we go. Now it's untitled, and it still shows the content section there. The nice round, the header style is still visible. So it's going to be untitled until I set it. This could also be, it is Mab UK. You're coming in at the very end, by the way. We're getting ready to wrap up here. I'm putting some additional thoughts around some things. This is the Blazor 2-hour power 2 hours. Power hours. Maybe I should just put an S on the end of the show. I have to constrain myself to an hour. The Blazor power hours. Or would it be the powers hour? So, I don't know. So this might be a nice way to document as well. Just kind of thinking outside the box on the fly here. If you were to create a 2-column layout, these things can get even more complex, by the way. Like, just because it's a 2-column layout, what if, let's, can I highlight these columns? I can if I do it this way here. Let's take a look. So I'm going to throw you another what if scenario here. If I click on this and we go into our grid, and some designer or stakeholder or whatever comes in and says, that's the wrong grid. Let me highlight the correct grid here. There we go. So this is my 2 columns here. I've got this subnav and I've got my main, and they're like, well, I need to show a banner, but I want the banner to extend across both of these columns. Then what? Then what do we do, right? So what if we wanted to add something like that? Well, maybe just because it's a 2-column grid, maybe we have something else in here. We can just throw a div here, and we could call it something like class is message section or something like that. And now we have yet another section. Duplicate that one. Now we have a section here. Go ahead and create the outlet for it. And we call this one message. And then what we want here is some sort of like alert box or something that we can display. We want that to span across all of the columns too. So let's take care of that real quick. Div message section. And then we would say grid column. And then this is going to be 1 through -1. What does that do? Well, that tells it to span both the columns. So we're going to go ahead and span across both columns. And then what we can do here is we can set up, let's see, we need some kind of component. I took out what's it called, Bootstrap already. So we might need to throw in a quick component in here just to make this idea a little bit more visible. We'll do, let's say alert.razor, and alert.razor is going to be a paragraph with an class is alert, and then child content there. Let me say code. Parameter is going to be a public child content render fragment child content. Get it, set it. Ignore the squigglies. What I do wrong. Wait, what? Why can't I use a parameter? What's wrong with this? It is Okie dokie. Is this a bunch of false positive, negative type stuff? What's going on there? What did I do? Can I not write a component anymore? Attribute not valid on this declaration type? Yeah, chat. What did I do wrong? It's just a regular component. What is the deal here? Did I misspell something somewhere? Parameter. That's interesting. Render fragment. Child content. Parameter. And then we'll throw the question mark at the end. Oops. Oh, that's really question mark in the wrong place. Thank you, Mr. Magoo. Of course. I don't know why I always do that, but I do. It's like a really bad habit. It never ceases to fail. Oh, we also need to do, let's see, add class. No, add new item, just an arbitrary type of item, alert.razor.css. And then we'll just say that this is alert is going to be background color of, let's see what reds we have here, dark red, color white, and then border radius 5 pixels. That should be good enough for an example. So the thing was, somebody says, you know, I want 2 columns, but I want a thing to span 3 columns. So we just added to our 2-column layout this message section. And inside of that message section, we can now address that concern. On our index page here, let's go ahead and add that section in. SectionContent. Section ID is going to be 2 columns, sections, message. And in that message content section, I'm going to say alert. This is a warning message, right? Very arbitrary, but it's just demo stuff. So some padding would have been nice there, I suppose. So this gets displayed across the entire banner, like spans both columns. Yeah. This, I don't know why I always do that with those stupid question marks, but I do. It's embarrassing. Embarrassing, I tell you. Not really, but on stream maybe. Can't remember what I always use for that. We'll go with that. I don't know why I have to make it look nice when it's not really going into any kind of production, but there we go. That looks better. So we now it's fully spanning both columns. We still have 2 columns. Now we have a section that does that. And then you start getting into like, well, you know, if you can do that, then how do you know where all these sections are? Maybe that's where you can make these a little bit self-documenting or something. We've added some, well, not on that one. I need to borrow. Let's just pretend for a moment we documented all of these. That one, that one, that one. They all say the same thing. We're just saying, Okay, we documented all these, but still, if I created a brand new page, add new razor component, call this one blank for very obvious reasons, at page. Route to blank, and there's no code in it, nothing at all, and we do layout is going to be the 2-column layout. So this shows nothing, right? This shouldn't show anything at all except the footer, I think. Footer is the only thing that has some sort of content in it. So this is our blank page. Oh, it does have the header too, because I put the default in the header. I have the footer. One thing you could do is you could make use of these. Oops, I meant section content. You could say that the section ID here is also a message. You know, a better way of doing this might be is just to duplicate this guy, change this to a open tag, and then change the type. That give me less typing. There we go. That probably is easier. So you could do this. These are all what if scenarios. Like this is a brand new feature. So it's not like I'm using this in production somewhere and I know exactly what I'm talking about. But so you could leave some default content in these. That might be a long link, but we'll see. Main content, actually might not put that one because of the whole body thing. Maybe that's not something I want to force. So we'll go ahead and leave that one blank. But if we go back to our empty page, we'll at least get this spans all columns. Navs or filters are here, and then of course the main content would be there. We probably want to, at least on our blank razor, do let's see here. If I generated a new page, I want to see where my body content is going to end up. So maybe I'm developing this. I want just my layout there. And I want some kind of developer experience that's helpful. The downside to this is now that I have these placeholders here, I have to at least set them to empty. But at least I know they're there and I can use them. Maybe there's, you know, there's a top message and a bottom message. I've seen templates like this where there's literally like 20 sections on a page just because they're so flexible and all the things you can add to them. And I don't know what impact that would have on performance, by the way. But in theory, you can have all of these outlets all over the page that have, you know, spanning columns at the top, spanning columns at the bottom. You've got your 2-column layout here. There's actually a website that does these things pretty intensively. or what's it called? Like Joomla and some of the WordPress and some of this stuff. So like if you go to themes, I'm trying to remember where you might see this demo. And there's usually a page that shows you where all of these block variations, like it'll show you but it'll show you like where all the sections are. There's one page that like shows every definition of every configuration possible like on this website, and it's just block after block after block after block. So you know, there's definitely oh, I didn't have it on the right screen when I did that, did I? Shoot. Oh well, I digress. You could have like a demo page, maybe if you don't want to bake those in as actual like sections that are fully defined here as, you know, empty content or blank content. You could just have like a demo page, like in your maybe your design library or something that has all of these sections filled out, so somebody can at least see what's available in all of those templates. Yeah, you could assign backgrounds to those as well if you wanted to do that message section, like you suggested there in chat, Janescu. If you wanted to do that, you could easily do. Let's see, that was on the 2-column layout, and then you have your message section, and you would give it a background color of, let's say, like Alice Blue, something that's not like super intense. Actually, I have to put that in a, let's see how that renders out. It looks a little weird the way I just did it. So you might want to add some more padding to that as well. So then you'd add padding 1 rem. There we go. You could do that too. Now, if you want it to span outside of the this boundary, like off the page, that's a whole other thing. You have to wrap it in a. It'd have to be outside of the columns. It'd have to be outside the grid. But that's a whole other story. It can be part of your main layout too. It doesn't have to be part of the 2-column layout. You could actually move that into the main layout too. So if you wanted that message section outside here, you could go up to, it might actually make more sense there, but this is kind of just a generic idea thrown out there. But if we go to main layout, it would be beneath the header and above this section maybe. So you might want to throw it in there like that. And then you could style it however you'd like. You could do it border to border. You could have yet an additional message there. And this one would be, instead of like message section, I might actually call it like before body or something like that. And then I might have one after the body. So you have these different sections that wrap, you know, there's one before the body, there's one after the body. That way you can attach to all of those. So lots of options here. We could probably go on all day just because the flexibility of the web and how many different types of layouts are possible out there. Was it container fluid that filled the page? No, actually, I ripped Bootstrap out of here because we just frankly don't need it anymore. So I just wrote my own in there. So if you look at this layout, I've got a main wrapper, the grid container, which is the row layouts, the header, the footer, and the body. So anything I add in here, div, I want it to have a class of container on it. I could say container message like that. And then we could throw a section outlet in there. This was all just custom CSS I wrote real quick. Message or body before, and then we could do a body before. Heck, we even duplicate that one, do a body after, like I said earlier. Do a body before, body after, and body. And then we took the one out of 2 column. Let's fix that. Yank that out of there. And then blank made no use of it. Okay, we never used that one actually. So there's before, after, and then in the CSS, if you wanted to add like a banner color to them, let's actually change this to for body. We could actually individually color those if we wanted to. Since they're containers, they will get the 80% width of, oh, actually, I messed that up. They need a container. This needs to be outside the container. Class. Body before. So we'd wrap this around it. Wrap it around any container, and it's going to go edge to edge. But it works exactly like container fluid would in Bootstrap, I guess. Basically coded up the same way that it would be in Bootstrap. Could you have a 2 column and a 3 column on the same page? Technically, yes. I think it could get confusing, and then you also need, if you're going to do this with semantic HTML, you're going to want, when you do 2 and 3 columns, you're going to have a main. So if we look at 2 columns, we've got nav and main. We could toss a 3rd column in there and just have it as a section or a div. You may start losing some of the semantic meaning if you try to mix these together. And then you would have to decide how that would turn from 2 columns to 3 through CSS. You can make that happen. You can write grids to where they'll expand automatically. It just gets to be overly complex, I think. I think it might be easier to just be less generic and have a 2 or 3 column layout and just have them have proper semantics and not have overly complex CSS to auto expand and all of that. But technically, yeah, you probably could make them the same page. So we've got the befores to afters now. No, we don't have the after. After. And then if we go back in here and we do body before, background, color. Let's do light pink, just so we can identify where these are. after, you could do this type of thing. And layouts could get quite busy. And then if we go to any of these now, any show data, let's see, index. It is now in the main layout, sections before, and then we'll just throw another one on. And again, it doesn't matter what order these are in. So now I can throw an after on there. And they're the same warning message. We don't really care about that. We'll just go ahead and look at it. And I botched something somewhere. I don't know what exactly I did wrong, but this one is taking up way too much space. It's probably my row templates, actually. So now we've got more rows. So we've got 5 rows. So the auto. Can we do auto twice like that? I think so. There we go. That worked. So we've got the header. We've got the before the body. We've got the body that contains our 2-column or 3-column template. Then we've got the after, and then we've got the footer. All right. So there's that. We could do that. Hey, Aztec, welcome. We were just beating the tires off of sections in Blazor, and we're about to wrap up here. I do need to go, but I am writing an article on this. I will post the source code when I'm done. This is kind of a hot mess. I don't want to post this, what I just wrote, to GitHub yet, but there will be a more streamlined version of this I post to GitHub eventually. And if you're not a CSS guru, by the way, won't get into this today. I will in the article, I hope. So you saw me writing all this with CSS and CSS Grid. Just a quick message before I go. If you're not into CSS Grid and you still want to write layouts like that, Telerik has a component for that. So underneath of layout, there is a stack in a tile and a grid layout. So if you'd rather write your layouts using components, you could use Telerik grid layout, and then you say, how many columns do you want? What do you want the rows to be? And then it's very similar to the CSS that you saw, but this is all component based. I will catch you all soon. Take care.